Ladies and gentlemen, let's give credit to Apostle Makore, also known as Doc MacLeod, for opening the floodgates. What began as a prophetic teaser quickly spiraled into what can only be described as a national security breach, disguised as a gospel broadcast. Once the curtain lifted, there was no turning back. Zimbabweans weren't just watching a prophecy unfold, they were witnessing the quiet unthreading of a regime. At the heart of it, a claim so explosive it would send ripples through any dictatorship. The Zimbabwe Defense Forces have allegedly stepped away from shielding the presidency. Not with a bang, but with a whisper. They didn't pull triggers, they pulled the plug. The commander-in-chief, once encircled by polished boots and ironclad loyalty, is now said to be surrounded by echoes and uncertainty. It's not a coup, but it sure smells like the prequel. This withdrawal is structured, deliberate, and surgical. First came the media blackout. No more state-sponsored hero worship. No more generals nodding behind podiums like possessed bobbleheads. Second, military officials are now to remain invisible in partisan spaces. No berets in campaign rallies, no uniforms in propaganda shoots, and finally, the most lethal cut, Mnangagwa allegedly no longer receives military briefings. The commander-in-chief has been stripped of his command. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, the Zimbabwe National Army or the Zimbabwe Defense Forces has decided to be professional for a change. That in Zimbabwe is a silent revolution. But what poisoned the well? Why the change? Why the sudden need of wanting to be professional? The answer, according to insider briefings, lies in a familiar scandal wrapped in a ballot paper. The infamous V11 forms. We talked about this in a previous episode. These polling station returns, once sealed away in the vaults of Zek mythology, have allegedly found their way into military hands, and they are not matching up. The discrepancies between what the military reportedly saw and what Zek announced were apparently so stark that even hardened commanders couldn't keep pretending the 2023 elections were anything but a stage-managed farce. The V11s may now be the regime's smoking gun, or just another cardboard prop in Zimbabwe's long-running political puppet show. But either way, they have triggered something dangerous: clarity. And clarity in politics is the enemy of control. This electoral betrayal was only part of the road. The bigger insult, that the soldiers who helped install Mnangagwa now find themselves sidelined, while his newfound Gucci gang hoovers up tenders, land, and cushy contracts like kids in a candy store. Long-serving generals, once promised the spoils of loyalty, are now watching from the sidelines as bootlickers reap the rewards. That is, if they are not dead already. Even the military's top brass weren't spared. Positions that traditionally belonged to war veterans were allegedly handed to soft-handed civilians with designer watches and party connections. It's one thing to rig an election. It's another to rob your own army of lunch. And that reportedly is what broke the camel's back. Inside a military barracks, a tense meeting unfolded. Heated arguments gave way to reluctant agreement. The nation must now come before the party. The army, it is said, resolved to no longer protect politicians. Instead, they pledged to protect the constitution. That's not rebellion. That's refusal. And in a regime built on obedience, refusal is fatal. One general question allegedly dominated the room. Would they block impeachment if it were initiated by Parliament? The answer was chilling in its restraint. In other words, the answer was a very, very professional. We will not support it, but we will not stop it. And that's how exactly the army should behave. That one line flipped the chessboard. It is signaled that MPs now had a green light to move. No tanks, no threats, no silent knocks at 3 a.m. Just a wide open lane towards impeachment. Outside Parliament, the shockwaves were just as visible. Police, it's claimed, have been instructed to stand down. Protesters are reportedly free to express themselves without fear of tear gas or baton charges. The state, for the first time in years, is unarmed against its own people. It's not peace, it's permission. The army has given permission to the people to protest. So next time Geza calls for a protest, don't talk about protection of the army, don't talk about being arrested. It's not going to happen. And with permission comes momentum. The business elite, those once deep in the president's Gucci pocket, are now said to be jumping ship. Like rats off a luxury cruise liner during a cholera outbreak. Offshore accounts are swelling. Property transfers are accelerating. Everyone, it seems, can read the wind, and it's not blowing towards 2030 anymore. In fact, the once deafening 2030 mantra has quietly died. The dream of Mnangagwa ruling until then, once shouted from every rally stage, now has been reduced to a whisper. Let him just finish his second term. From ED fair to ED please. A fall from grace so steep, even gravity is impressed. As the center loses hold, a familiar name re-emerges from the shadows. Nelson Chamisa. Mind you, if the V11s show that the elections of 2023 were tampered with, that means, in actual fact, Chamisa is the legitimate president of Zimbabwe. And that whoever is running the country now is not a democratically elected president. Mnangagwa is not a democratically elected president. Nelson Chamisa, the former opposition leader, who once declared a break from politics, is now reportedly staging a careful return. His cryptic tweets, veiled jabs, and spiritual metaphors now read less like devotionals and more like campaign slogans. Word has it that a new party is in the works. The pulpit may still be his stage, but the streets are calling him back. President Chamisa, we need you back. And then there is the biggest ghost in the room, Constantino Chiwenga. The man who once removed a president with surgical precision now lurks in silence. He hasn't defended Mnangagwa, he hasn't attacked him either. He has simply waited, clean, calculated, and conspicuously quiet. Not a stain, not a scandal. His wife is smiling in public. His CV is gleaming. His ambition is showing. He wasn't at the military meeting, but perhaps that's the plan. When the dust settles, guess who looks least tainted? Meanwhile, ZEC is reportedly preparing to leak the full truth behind the 2023 vote, encouraged by the army's withdrawal. With the generals no longer acting as bodyguards for the lie, the Electoral Commission may finally find the courage to be honest, or at least slightly less fraudulent. And just in case the stakes weren't high enough, Word on the ground is that those pushing for a transitional government like Trevor Ncube and Ibo Mandaza may now find unexpected allies within the military. If true, it means the idea of a temporary caretaker government isn't just an academic fantasy. It's being discussed in rooms that actually matter. Will Tendai Biti make a comeback as the president of the National Transitional Government? But the real question remains, is this a coup? Not exactly. It's not the 2017 model with tanks in the streets and soldiers reading the Bible on TV. This is softer, smarter, legal even. The army isn't taking over. They are stepping aside. But their neutrality creates the exact environment in which a coup no longer needs to happen because the target is already naked. When the institutions that protect you stop doing so, you are not removed. You simply fall. And so the question becomes, what happens now? Will Parliament act? Will the streets rise again? Will Chamisa make his comeback official? Will Chiwenga finally speak? When Geza gave his speech, his last speech on the 16th, a lot of people were saying Geza does not have a plan. Now he has seen that he has failed and is calling upon the army to act. Well, looks like Geza already had intel of what the army was already doing behind the scenes. Will this be an opportunity for Zimbabwe? Or will Zimbabwe, as it so often has, squander another turning point and slide back into silence? One thing is certain. The spell of invincibility surrounding Mnangagwa is broken. Whether it shatters with a bang, a whimper, or a secret parliamentary vote, that remains to be seen. But the foundation is cracked. The generals have walked out of the palace, and the people, after years of being told to shut up, may have just been handed a microphone. The Joint Operations Command may not be speaking, but their silence at this point is louder than 1,000 parades. To all of you who did not heed the call to go to protest because you wanted a guarantee from the army, here is your guarantee. Next time when Geza comes on your screen and says, let's go on the streets, let's all go on the streets. The police have been restrained. The army has given you permission. So you have no excuse. So if you're watching Zimwaves TV and want part 2 of this prophecy 10 political thriller, don't just sit there like a ZEC official hiding a V11. Smash that subscribe button because in Zimbabwe, even the prophets are now reading the news. If you want to watch the original video in which Apostle Makore made this announcement, check in the description for the video link. Subscribe to his channel and share it. You will see that there are a lot of videos on that channel which really make sense, so give him all the support.